Hey guys, it's Charles with Sports Solutions Podcast. We have Alex, we have Aaron, we have Steven. Aaron and Steven are going to be talking about the rosters real quick as we slide into this NHL All-Star game coming up. And so, yeah, Aaron will be talking about the West, and Steven will be talking about the East. Later on, we have some stuff about maybe a few snubs, as well as obviously we'll hit on the Ovechkin situation down there. So, Aaron, you want to head us off?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get it started. Let's talk about the Central Division first. Obviously, Nathan MacKinnon was voted captain into his third All-Star game from Colorado, followed up by Patrick Kane, his eighth All-Star game, Ryan O'Reilly, St. Louis, obviously, Mikko Rantanen, Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, Miro Heiskanen, Roman Josi, Devin Dubnyk, and Pekka Rinne. One thing to note there, Patrick Kane, his eighth All-Star appearance, that leads the NHL this year in most NHL appearances. And it's pretty exciting. Miro Heiskanen, obviously the rookie out of Dallas, lighting it up down there. It's pretty cool to see him make his first All-Star appearance. We'll move into the Pacific next. Connor McDavid voted captain into his third straight All-Star game. Johnny Gaudreau, Clayton Keller, Joe Pavelski, Elias Pettersson, who might be the most intriguing name on this list. Obviously, he's second year in a row that Vancouver's had a rookie represent the All-Star game. And followed up Brent Burns, Erik Karlsson, Drew Doughty, Marc-Andre Fleury, and John Gibson wrapping up the netminders. Few things to notice there. Obviously, hometown team in the All-Star game this year is getting 3 representatives. As kind of per tradition, the hometown team gets an extra representative, so the hometown fans have something to cheer about. I don't know what you guys feel about that, if that's right or not, but we can get into that later. Steven, you want to go ahead and talk about the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, definitely, man. So with the East, I mean, usually it's always probably dominated by a couple big names. You know, you have the Crosbys and the Ovechkins, and we're going to get to Ovechkin here in a little bit. But actually, this year it's kind of a lot of guys that are maybe not as mainstream with a lot of these teams. It's actually been pretty interesting. We'll start in the Atlantic Division. Jack Eichel just leading the resurgence in Buffalo. They were one of the hottest teams in the league earlier this season. Really having a great year up there. Nikita Kucherov in Tampa Bay, probably the best player on that team, and not named Steven Stamkos, of course. Just an absolute pure scorer, just a great NHL player all around. So, I mean, I think those two are big. Austin Matthews, oh boy, does Toronto have a special guy in him? Probably the best young player in the league right now, easily, bar none. You got Pastrnak from Boston, Steven Stamkos that I mentioned earlier from Tampa, John Tavares, another Maple Leaf, coming from the Islanders, going back to his hometown in Toronto. You know, that's probably easy. I mean, most All-Star games, we know how this works. I mean, we're going to talk about it later, but a lot of times it is a popularity contest. Chabot in Ottawa, defenseman, Yandel in Florida. In terms of defensemen, that might be the weakest pairing out of all the All-Star teams right now. And with goaltenders, you got Jimmy Howard in Detroit, kind of having a resurgence in his career. Has had a couple down years in the past couple years, and I think that was just with Detroit not necessarily having the talent they're used to. And Carey Price in Montreal, which is kind of always a given. Probably one of the best goaltenders in the league, easily top 5 guy. So I think with the Atlantic, that's they're going to be a pretty solid team. Like I said, the defensemen kind of, not top tier guys, not big name guys in the league, but I mean, definitely deserving of their spots. We're going to the Metro. You got O from Carolina, Cam Atkinson from Columbus, Barzal from the New York Islanders. We got Sidney Crosby, of course. Again, another popularity contest, but I mean, he's having a pretty damn good year. Claude Giroux from Philly, the last year's MVP, and Taylor Hall from New Jersey, which I think is a very deserving award. He's starting to really kind of pick up steam, and I think it's kind of nice for him to get back into the All-Star game. You got John Carlson, which Seth Jones, another really good young defenseman from Columbus, having a great year. And Braden Holtby from the Washington Caps. and Henrik Lundqvist rounding out the division in terms of goaltenders. I do have an issue with Lundqvist being in there, but we can get to that a little later. But in terms of, I mean, if you just look at the rosters as a whole, I would say the West is definitely a lot more loaded than the East in terms of just overall superstar talent and goal scorers. So, if I had to pick a team to win right now, I'd probably put in the Pacific, but that would probably be my pick.
I've got something for you guys. I thought it was a little interesting because you look at all these players and some of them you think are surefire, bang on All-Stars every year. And I think we'd all agree before the emergence of Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews, Sidney Crosby was unanimously the best NHL player on the planet. I think we could all agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Something interesting that I came across here, since he's been in the league, drafted in 2005, Sidney Crosby has only been to 4 All-Star games.
Wow, that's interesting.
Didn't know that.
I think
a lot of injuries, though. I mean,
yeah, and that does play a factor. It's just you throw out the term very often in all these All-Star competitions, popularity contests. You see the biggest names are given every single year just because of what they've done previously, and that kind of stuck out to me. Like, wow. Sidney Crosby, best player in the world for so many years, 4 All-Star games. And you're right, injuries did play a part of that, and that can't be overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
I also thought it was kind of interesting, kind of going into the snubs here in a little bit, but you could almost make an entire roster of players that are sitting out from the Atlantic Division. The Atlantic is so deep.
Mm-hmm.
And just for the sheer fact that there aren't enough roster spots for all of them, you could make a 5th team almost, which is pretty impressive. Pass it over to you, Charles. What do you think?
Yeah, I just thought it was unique how, last year there were, in 2018, there were 44 players who attended the All-Star game, and this year it's going to be about the same, between 40 and 50. And then 4 of those top 15, but 4 of the top 15 scorers in the NHL aren't there. So as Steven and Aaron both noted, you've got to start looking at the popularity contest and being like, yeah, I understand this guy's name. It's kind of like the Melvin Ingram situation in the NFL. I understand this guy's name's great, but these players are putting out every week or every game in, game out. So, Alex, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking when it comes to the NHL All-Star, it's kind of wishy-washy, but I just don't understand how some of these players are in the All-Star game when there are so many other deserving players. And it kind of raises the question, why does every team need a representative for their division? Like, why can't the snubs, as people are saying, take the places of the people that shouldn't be there? Just so that every team can have a representative? That's wild to me.
Steve, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms, you got to look at it from, I think, multiple aspects, especially from the NHL, right? Like, you want to look at it, it's a money thing, right? Like, why are you going to snub a guy because maybe he's the best player on a team that's maybe not having the greatest year in the world, but at least you're going to have that guy on an all-star team, right? He's going to sell jerseys. They can sell merch, right? They can be able to market that guy. I mean, there is somewhat of it. Like, you can't just have just a whole team of nothing but guys from 1 or 2 teams because they're having great years. Like, I mean, if you look at the Central Division, you could probably just load that team up with the front line of the Avs and throw in Taves, Kane, a couple guys from the Jets, and you've got a freaking all-star team. And then you could literally leave out the rest from the Central Division, and they'd probably be able to compete on top of everybody else in every division. But you could do that with, like, any division or any freaking division too. You take the top 2 scorers, top 2 guys from each team, and you kind of just throw them out there. I mean, you got the Maple Leafs and the Lightning with 2 forwards each. Like that. I mean, those 2 teams they're high powered. They're scoring a lot. So I think it's a money thing. I think it's fair. I know it's maybe not fair for some guys or maybe having really good years on other teams, but I mean, it hurts, I think, at the NHL from a financial standpoint if they don't have guys from each team at least representing, in All-Star weekend. So, that's kind of my thoughts on that in terms of, having a representative for each team.
Okay.
I think I'm kind of on the opposite spectrum of that. If I think you make the All-Star game because you're the best on the planet, and there's no denying that scoring is up this year more so than any other previous year in NHL history. I mean, scoring is up, so obviously players' numbers are going to be inflated. You look at the top, Charles, you said 4 out of the top 15 in scoring aren't in the All-Star game.
Right.
You got to think some of these players are benefiting from an All-Star on their team's production. But like you look at the Avalanche and their top 3, arguably the best line in hockey right now. Gabriel Landeskog is having a career season, and he's undoubtedly the leader of that team. But he's benefiting exclusively off of McKinnon and his production and what Rantanen has been doing. And I think Rantanen, you could say the same thing about McKinnon. McKinnon fuels that team. He's the unquestioned all-star of that team, and he's got 2 players feeding off of him. Yep. But with that being said, you can't argue with production and the fact that there are players on this list that do not deserve to be there, and they're only there to represent their team. Case in point, in my opinion, Carey Price, Hall of Fame goaltender, hands down Hall of Fame goaltender. He does not deserve to be in that All-Star game because there are several goalies who are having better seasons than he is right now. I'm not questioning the dude's talent. This would be his 7th All-Star game. I don't think he deserves to be there. And kind of in point with what Steven was saying, Heinrich Lundqvist is not having a phenomenal season. He's there exclusively to represent the New York Rangers.
Yep.
And I think the goaltender position is an easy position to blame for these. I'm only there to represent my team. You could say defensemen as well. You could easily load these rosters exclusively with forwards, but at some point you got to draw the line.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, I mean, Lundqvist is having a pretty poor year, but I mean, also, like, I mean, you're battling for ratings, right? Like, you're battling for TV ad revenue, everything like that. Like, yeah, are there guys having better years than Henrik Lundqvist and Carey Price? Yes. But do anybody outside of the NHL world know who these guys are? Like, no. Like, you hear hockey, you know Henrik Lundqvist, you know Carey Price, right? Even if you're not a big hockey fan, even if you're not like totally following it or whatever, you know those 2 guys, right? So when you have the skills competition during All-Star weekend and it's the shootout period, right? I want to see Sidney Crosby versus Henrik Lundqvist or Nathan McKinnon against Carey Price in a shootout competition. Like, I don't want to see some guy from a random team who's having a good 50% of the season, right? No, I want a guy who's been proven, who's going to be the big name guy, who's going to sell tickets, who's going to sell merchandise, and that's what I want to run with. And like, they're going to draw ratings. That's going to draw ratings, and I think that's what's important. And I think sometimes you got to overlook maybe some of the guys that are getting snubbed for the reasons why that, hey, the NHL needs to do this to make money, to be successful. They have one of the best unique All-Star weekends that there is in terms of sports. Like the NFL's complete joke when it comes to All-Star games. I think that's the worst. MLB's kind of lost it due to the fact that they got rid of it counting and making home field advantage for the World Series. So I think the NHL, like the skills competition, they can do so many different things. They have fastest skater, best shot, hardest shot, the shootout competition, right? They do all that fun stuff. So I think it's just, yeah, I mean, it's name recognition when it comes down to it.
Right on. Yeah, no,
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I agree. With both you guys made crazy valid points, and I don't follow the NHL nearly as close as either of you. Right. But to Steve's credit, if I'm sitting at home not doing anything, I see the NHL All-Star games on. If you put someone, who is, top 4 or one of those 4 out of the 15 who aren't in the All-Star game and scoring there instead of Sidney Crosby, which you wouldn't take Sidney out. But I would be like, well, who is this person? I don't want to see this person. I see Sidney Crosby, I'll watch it alone for that. Henrik Lundqvist the same. Carey Price the same. So,
but on the same token as that, all these players who are having the seasons and they have the numbers and the performance to back up their attendance at the All-Star game, is it fair to them to say that, yes, you're best in the league, arguably, but you're not popular enough to go to the All-Star game? That's not right. And who's to say I turn on the All-Star game as a young amateur hockey fan, and I turn it on and I see a goaltender who I've never heard of before, but he's representing his team in the All-Star game. Like, that's pretty cool. I think you're depriving these players who are playing out of their minds the opportunity to gain new fans who don't know their name because they are young. And it's the All-Star game is supposed to be the best in the world, not the most popular name in the world.
Exactly, and that's what I was going to say. You turn the TV on, you see someone that you don't know, you're like, oh, well, if he's at the All-Star game, maybe I should take note of who this is.
Exactly.
I completely agree with that. I mean, you said that Carey Price doesn't deserve to be here. I mean, he's 7th in the league right now in wins. So there are only six goalies ahead of him in wins right now. So, I mean, if we're looking off of that, like I know it's maybe his save percentage might be down, goals against is a little high, but a lot of times that doesn't necessarily fall on goalies. I mean, you want to look at wins. I mean, there's only a handful of guys that are above them. And I mean, that seems to be where the most snubs are, is goalie, because you only take 2 goalies, and there's a lot of good ones. Like Sergei Bobrovsky from the Blue Jackets should be in. I mean, without a doubt, over Henrik Lundqvist in the Metro Division. Like, he's 4th in the league in wins. He's 2.7 goals against, 910 save percentage. I mean, he is like having a fantastic year with the Blue Jackets, and he's not in there. And like, there are snubs, and it's going to happen. But I mean, also, like, he's not the biggest name guy, and that's probably why. And he's not in a big market. I mean, Columbus compared to the Rangers, I mean, it's a fan vote, right? Like, that's how these guys get in. And I mean, yeah, does it hurt? Yes, but in the long run, I think it's better for hockey.
Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, you guys both made good points, and